Alright, so coming out, this is day 2 for me, checking it out. We're supposed to put the Hawaii Mars in the water today, and I see that they've got one of the, they call it the chuck wagon, looks like half of a Conestoga wagon up over number 4 engine. So let me see what's going on. Hopefully there's not a problem. Dave, the flight engineer, went up ahead of me. What they're checking out, a piece of cowling. All right, obviously all the big wigs are up here.
Yeah, this is the nerve center. You're talking about stature or positions?
That's right. No, Dave, I'm not talking about height. I'm talking about stature with you. That's interesting. I like this little turbine deal here. So one's fixed and one spins, huh?
Yeah, this is called the diffuser. And the other one's the fan.
So that's basically the air inlet for the cooling the cylinders. Yeah, so this is a Wright 3350 engine. I think it's about 2,200, 2,300 horsepower. It's got Curtis electric props. This little Conestoga wagon thing here they actually use for obviously getting up in a safe way to work on the engine, but it also in the wintertime this thing can actually be heated.
Hi there.
Here's a close look at the exhaust stacks. Okay, yeah, so here's the front one. It's got a little bit of a thing goes back there, and then you know, so the rear ones are shorter. It's got a little adapter connection for the front one. So anyway, so sometimes those things blow off, and you want to make sure they don't hit the tail feathers. Coming down from the chuck wagon. Man, I wouldn't want a trip coming down this puppy. Okay, now we've already done a walkthrough with the Philippine Mars, and I'm going to do a quick walkthrough here with the Hawaii Mars. Oh, look at that, they're already getting this puppy loaded. White suits. This is all pretty much similar up here. Anchor, chain, the relief tube in this one's hooked up. Fortunately, they have my size. Okay, here's the main difference back here. Of course, there's the batteries, the GE50s. The Philippine Mars isn't flying, so that's why there weren't any batteries in it. So here's the big difference right here of the two airplanes. This one uses, these are the fuel cells originally, but they've set them up to use them for water cells. So in here you can see you can actually crawl over the top of this, and whatever fuel cells are left that they're using are, you know, probably in this area here. I'm not sure, it doesn't look like, I'm not exactly sure where the fuel cells are, but these used to be some. And then this right here looks like the overflow dump, you know, in case the water tanks fill up all the way. Okay, there's the ones, looks like they're just after the step. I think that's the step right there, but possibly. Anyway, so if they fill up, then those are the spill deals going out the back. This is to put all the gel in or whatever, the fire retardant that they mix. So see, this airplane here would actually be easy to rip this stuff out, but then of course you haven't got the fuel on the bottom. Spare probe. A little back in area here with the rafts. This is how you get in and out. Give you an idea of the size. A PBY is basically half the wingspan of a Martin Mars. That's basically from here out to the tip is a PBY wingspan. You know, this airplane here is painted in the back where the other one's kind of been painted in the front. Back isn't really any different, you know, with the control boost pumps and the control locks and everything back there for the elevator and the rudder. Similar dance floor. Disco ball goes right here. The doors are up outside with little spring-loaded deals there. More fire retardant tanks. Generator room, all pretty much similar. And then of course this goes in the wing. And there's the hatches to go after the trailing edge. I'm not going to crawl through the wing. Head back down. Over the tanks. Up to the cockpit. All right, heading up to see the differences here in the Hawaii Mars. Same seats, exit. This is, I was in the back there earlier looking forward here. This is looking inside the wing. And of course back in there I realize now that's where the APUs are, auxiliary power units. There's only 2 batteries in the airplane, so you basically, when you're coming into land or taking off or anything, they're running the APUs, you know, so you've got electrical power. Because once you get the throttles back below 1500 or something like that, 1200, the generators go offline and you're not generating any electricity, so you're going just off the batteries, you know. So you want to make sure that you've got the APUs running. I think they run one at a time. So if one goes out, you got the other one. Of course, here's the engineer panel. They've got, you know, a flight first engineer, and then they got a second engineer, and the second engineer at some point becomes the bowsman. He's the guy that has to run down, you know, pick up and disconnect the mooring buoy, which is the same thing in the Sunderland. Sunderland did not have as a complicated panel as this. Of course, this is all the fuel system right here. You know, I'm anxious to learn about that, although the pilot doesn't so much worry about it up there. We've got all the, I got stuff in the way here, but you've got the mixtures here, auto rich, auto lean. They're idle cutoff right now. These look like your throttles, carb heat controls. Here's the propeller controls for the Curtiss electric prop. And then the pilot up front, he also has propeller controls. And then there's a switch that basically decides whether the pilot's got the propellers or the flight engineer's got the propellers. And then, you know, it's got reversible on 2 and 3. There's some lights there. I want to learn all about it with one of the flight engineer guys. So anyway, fuel flows, oil pressure, oh, front pump, rear pump. Okay, that's interesting. So there's 2 spots that are measuring oil pressure on these 3350 engines. Temps, oil in. Okay, there's one oil out. It's interesting. Okay, and then they got manifold pressure gauges, cylinder head temps, tachometers for the 4 engines, and then they've got these BMEP gauges, which means brake mean effective horsepower. And I've never used these before, but basically they measure the horsepower of the engine. You know, in an airplane without this, it's you got manifold pressure and RPM, and it's putting out whatever it puts out. In a single engine airplane, it's either working or it's not. So got a little bit nicer navigator table here. Our radio looks, like I said, one of these is navigator, one of them is radio. So you can see they've really upgraded the panel here on this one. They gave me a PowerPoint yesterday, and unfortunately when I was looking at it last night, it was locking up on my computer, so I couldn't really get through it. But I want to sit up here with my laptop and actually go through the checklist and all that, you know, and actually see where everything is. Dev did a great job creating it. but it'll be great to sit up here in the environment and basically figure out what the pilot and the co-pilot, flight engineer, how all the crew works together and all the different call signs and stuff. Control lock, little key there, just like the other one. And you know, they've got the PFD and the MFDs for the pilot and the co-pilot. GPSs. These are what do you call FM radios that they use talking to the boatman as well as the base. And there's all the doors and the probe lights, and then in this one they actually have you can calculate, or not calculate, but those are like, tells you how much water they've got in the tanks. So if they're cruising along and obviously it's not filling, it'll let you know how much water's in there. So if you're taxiing around, and like in the case of they had a leak in the right tanker that we're fixing right now, they it would have shown up on there. So before you take off, when you get up to around 16 knots, you can actually trail the doors, and when that happens, you know, it basically just sucks the water out. Well, that's that. Pretty cool. So that's the difference between the Philippine and the Hawaii. We're supposed to put this in the water at 10 o'clock, but apparently they're running a little bit behind for something. So this works out for me because I got a little bit of time to get some breathing room. Anyway, so out we go down the stairs. Not exactly the staircase in the Titanic, but it's sufficient. Too cool. Too cool. Oh my God, I would love to end up with this airplane. I'd rather have the Philippine Mars, but I think that's slated for the Navy Museum. So here we are beginning to put the Hawaii Mars in the water, and very similar to the Philippine Mars. We're going to cut this a little bit shorter than the Philippine Mars because we discussed a lot in the other video. This is the truck that actually pulls the cable that has a pulley in the water there that's actually pulling the nose. So in case the airplane kind of gets away or something, or there's a crosswind and it disconnects the tail cable, which they're using right now, they would have a way to continue to pull it out in the water and get it away from the shore. I don't know who did all this camera work, but my compliments to the photographer. That's a cool shot. So here we are basically taking the beaching gear off, which obviously is only to get it in and out of the water for maintenance. The red one here they've got on the port side, and there's a bit of a technique to this. Do you attach that to anything with a rope or anything?
We will tow it back. Normally there's a rope on it.
Of course, it's between the boat and the flying boat. You got to be careful that you don't pinch your fingers, as you can imagine, with a little bit of chop in the water and the boat moving around and this thing floating. Oh, there you go. Hello.
That was the whole plan. Hey, say that again on the other side. Yeah.
And it's basically they just float, and then probably the container they can probably you know, adjust it slightly with the amount of air that's in the container. But they actually fill the tires with some kind of a powder that actually adds weight to it, so they can get the buoyancy that they want, so it floats right where they need it to. They just tow it back to shore with a boat, and eventually they'll pull this out with a, you know, some kind of a piece of equipment, a crane or something like that, store it on the shore. There it is, just tying it off there. Go out and get the other one, and there is the other one. See, it's on the green. So now basically this is the tail one, which has 2 pins on both sides. Plus, I believe they've already disconnected a pin on the bottom already. So it's basically kind of floating backwards a little bit. And it's going to tie the boat up so it doesn't float away. So there's a pin down on the bottom there that at this point they've disconnected. You can see it's loose. So they're going to set up and pull both pins on each side at the same time. And success. Try not to scratch the paint.
We don't have any ropes. I'll take it. I knew the ropes wouldn't get here. Yeah, we were going to put them on, but... Okay, you got it, Glenn?
And tie a big rope on it and tow that puppy back too.
We'll take her to the ramp, I guess.
So here's the crane that they've got to haul this out of the water. I assume they'll probably pull the other ones out a similar way. Now, I got to tell you, you know, you just look at the airplane and you go, yeah, that's pretty cool. But now look at all this equipment that goes along with it. You got cranes, you got trucks, you got, you know, special equipment to put it in the water. You got beaching gear. You got boats and all the people it takes to operate this. You've got these, you know, chuck wagon things that they use for getting up to working on the engines and everything else. I mean, it's just an amazing amount of effort, an amount of teamwork that it takes to pull this thing off. All right, pretty cool. Check it out. We got the Philippine Mars in the water. We got the Hawaii Mars in the water. It's been interesting. Longer days than I think everybody expected, but success. Okay, so here we're basically, you know, they've got a test flight program. The airplane hadn't flown in a while. People haven't been in the airplane, so all the initial flights and everything were basically, you know, done with Dev and Peter. You know, and I basically just kind of watched, got the feel of what it was like, did a little bit of filming, got a chance to, you know, run around inside the airplane and, you know, see what was happening while it was flying. Just more and more crew coordination. So here they are flying around, and basically they just come on and put a couple hours on the airplane and just kind of feel it out. The airplane hadn't flown in a while, and this is going to be a big trip to Oshkosh and back, so we're getting ready, and I'm going to get to do some flying a little bit later. That's a scene from the co-pilot seat. Doing a little bit of flying. Here we are buzzing one of the first airports on the maintenance checklist. I think there was a little museum at this airport. They called ahead, they knew we were coming, so we were making a little bit of a flyby for them. Somewhere down there on the starboard side there was a little museum with everybody out waving. And we basically flew around the island of the southern end, you know, did some flybys here and there, and trying to see what's coming up next here. Just mainly putting some time on it, making sure everything's running the way it should. You can see there's lots of hills and little valleys and fjord type features that they fly around in. It's a beautiful country. So here we are doing a water pickup as they want to test out all that equipment as well. Dev and Peter are flying. I'm just basically in the back filming. And I think Dev had already pre-programmed. This is a little airport that he's got friends at, and they're going to be shooting some video that he gave me later. Here comes a dump. Passing the airport. Everybody loves these airplanes on the island. Now this is Victoria, I believe, and we made a flyby around there. Way off in the distance is the Orcas, the San Juan Islands, and got a chance to buzz my friend Richard Bach, who lives on the islands. Now this was really cool. Here we are increasing the RPM, increasing the power, making some noise, and we are going to buzz the Vancouver International Airport. It was on our checklist to do, and the tower is out there watching us and waving, having a good time. I think that one of them was up there sunbathing, actually. Yeah, we got a chance to fly around Vancouver a little bit, and a little bit of a surprise. They're flying by the city, and eventually we're going to go ahead and put it into the water, do a test there. Of course, this would be in the salt water. There we are landing. Oh man, it might even be Sydney Harbor, actually. Is that the Sydney Opera House I see in the distance? Actually, I think that's just Vancouver. We taxi around a little bit. I think a lot of people were watching us and wondering, what? Oh my God, I think we just flashed back 70 years ago. And here we are taking off and clearing the ridge in the distance. Okay, coming up in part 3, Kermit's going to get to do a little bit of flight training. Phil, you have no idea how hard I've been working.